Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank all of you for your service to the country. Director Comey, I wanted to follow up on one of Senator Paul's questions and start with this in terms of the Mateen situation in Orlando. I understand that he was interviewed twice by the FBI, and then the inquiry was closed. Is that true?
Yes, he was interviewed twice during a 10-month, 11-month investigation. Then the preliminary was closed.
So in that investigation, was there any work done to see what he was doing online? In other words, you interviewed him in person. Was there anything looked at to see what he was doing online?
As I understand it today, there were no search warrants for his the content of any of his devices or the content of his held by a service provider.
But I guess my question is, there's even work you can do without a search warrant just publicly. Was anything done to see whether he was saying anything online or doing anything without going into getting a search warrant at that point?
In public, like public posting,
Public space.
social media?
Public space. Did the FBI do anything?
I don't know the answer. I don't think so at this point.
Okay, so one of the things that, as I understand too from what I've heard in prior briefings, that was not done. And as I look at the situation, one thing that I would assume that we would do in every investigation, even before we got to the level of looking for content, is to see if there's anything in the publicly available space that individuals you're following up on may be saying, or about terrorism, about any extreme figures. Would you agree that that would be a natural step in an investigation?
Maybe, and maybe that's one of the things we learned from our look back. It would depend upon the investigation. In this one, they had two sources who were speaking to him, including taping conversations with him. So I think the case agent thought they had a pretty good vector into his state of mind.
Well, I guess my question goes to are there lessons learned, and was everything done well in Orlando? This one seems obvious to me, that when you have an individual who's made some extreme statements, you're interviewing them. We know also that you tried to verify through secondary means, but it just seems surprising to me that there wasn't some kind of online work done in something so significant. So that to me is of deep concern. I hope you will give us a report exactly of what was done or not done in that instance. And I'm in the camp of, one of the things I know is important to the FBI, because you've testified before other committees, is wanting the authority, what's called the ECTR fix, or the Electronic Transactions Records fix. Can you explain the significance of that to this committee and why it's important? Because having been a prosecutor before this, I can assure you that in your basic child pornography case, internet predator case, I was able to get these types of records. And tell us how you're being limited right now and why you need us to fix it.
Sure. For many years, we were able to issue national security letters, which are issued in our national security cases, counterintelligence or counterterrorism cases, for telephonic transaction records and internet transaction records, not the content of people's calls or their emails, but the IP addresses involved and who they communicated with on the internet and by telephone. Several years ago, lawyers for some internet service providers started to interpret the statute to say, if you read the language, it actually, through what I think was a mistake, should not allow you to use an NSL to get transaction records on the internet where you can get them on telephony, and interpreted that way. The fix that we think, because we think Congress intended to allow us to use NSLs in both circumstances, is to allow us to get non-content for telephone transaction records and internet transaction records.
And you would agree this is a very common tool in criminal cases, just average criminal cases, where you're not getting content, but you are actually, in many instances, issuing a subpoena to get the basic electronic records. And it seems absurd to me that we can't do that basic fix that only failed the Senate by 1 vote. So I hope we can get you that authority. I wanted to follow also up on the most recent case where Mr. Rahami has been arrested. And in that instance, I know Senator Paul had asked you about that, but one thing is what the public reports of what is out there, it's my understanding that he was actually flagged by the Department of Homeland Security after he arrived back from Pakistan, and notified by the National Targeting Center based on when he was stopped at the airport. And that National Targeting Center, as I understand it, is under Homeland Security. And as a result of that, that information was passed on to the FBI. Later, in August of 2014, Mr. Rahami's father makes some type of report to him. I know with some connection to terrorism. And at that point, that was also provided to the FBI. So the reports are that he was never interviewed there. So what I think we're trying to understand is these are basic steps that when you have someone traveling to Quetta, Pakistan, even if they have family members there, we know that's a hub of terrorism and a very dangerous place. And that flag and that travel history combined later with a report where a family member reports a potential tie with terrorism and yet no in-person interview. So can you help us understand, do you have enough people? Is there some reason why he wouldn't be interviewed? And what are the things we need to learn from this? Because obviously we want to prevent it in the first place, but when something like this comes through your doors, we want to make sure it's followed up on so that we can do all we can with local law enforcement to stop these things before they start.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I will at some point want to have that conversation. I don't want to have it now for two reasons. First, this is an active investigation. This guy's alive and entitled to a fair trial, and I don't want to do anything that gives him an opportunity to claim we deprived him of that right. And second, I don't know yet. We're going to go back and look very carefully at the way we encountered him, and we will find the appropriate forum to give you that transparency about what we did well, what we could have done better, what we've learned from it. We haven't done that work yet because we're doing an active investigation, so I don't want to comment in this forum beyond that right now.
Well, I appreciate that, but I think this is a really important question for all of us. Number one, do you need different legal authorities? Number two, do you need more agents? Number three, was it something that was missed that this individual was not interviewed despite these flags? If we look at the Orlando situation, if we go back to Sarnav, each one of them, putting them together, what more do we need to do? What are the lessons learned? And if you need additional support, we need to know about it very quickly. So, thank you.
Senator Tester.